Hello and welcome back to the That's Metal Talking channel here at YouTube, and welcome to another album of the week. This, of course, is episode number 58. Since Women and Children First hit its 40th anniversary this past Thursday, which was March 26th, the day that it was released, which was, again, March 26th, 1980. And it was their third full-length album, of course, following Van Halen, the self-titled album from 1978, and of course Van Halen 2 from 1979. Now, before I really get into this album, I definitely should kind of go into a little brief history between as me kind of getting into to the band, which was of course at least the mid 2000s actually when I kind of got into these guys actually. Which, though I was aware of the band as far as during my young, when I was growing up, I was very much aware of them, but I think it was mostly the Sammy Hagar era. I was mostly a lot more familiar with in some aspects. Maybe hearing one or two songs, maybe on the radio or on TV, and that was about it. Maybe as far as anything from the David Lee Roth era, it's probably Panama, but that was about it. But when I first finally got to hear the first two albums, I definitely somewhat really appreciated them quite a bit. I really actually dug the first two albums. But since then, I probably have heard those two albums more than I could say, because they are completely implanted in my brain. So I don't pull those albums out as much as I do these days. But again, whenever I do, it definitely brings back quite a bit of nostalgia memories, and that's about it. Now I do know that the first Van Halen album is definitely heavily regarded as mostly the best debut album in many aspects. I know many people say it's the best Van Halen album, but I've heard a lot of people really say that it's also the best debut album ever, and I think that is very arguable. Okay, I will somewhat argue with that, but still, I digress. Still, though, again, I think the debut album is a fine album. Number two, I got a bit of a soft spot for her, even though I know it's probably a little notches down, I guess, from it. But I think there's some hidden gems in some aspects on on Van Halen 2, most notably Light Up the Sky, which I think is an underrated track off the second Van Halen album, but there's definitely fine songs on those two. Now, Women and Children First, the album that I'm about to be now finally talking about. Now, I will definitely say this. When I did first listen to Women and Children First, it hadn't yet really grown on me. It took me a long time to actually get into this album, because I think the first time I actually really kind of tried to give this album at least a bit of attention, a bit of its due, was probably back in 2008. I guess 2008, 2009, but nothing really completely clicked other than maybe And the Cradle Will Rock and Everybody Wants Some. Those are the only two I actually kind of remember liking, and those, of course, are the two biggest songs to come off this album. And of course, And the Cradle Will Rock was probably the first song I heard prior to listening to this album, as I had bought, was it the very best of Van Halen, Volume 1, I think it was. I bought that one a long time ago, and it was the song that actually opened up the disc, and that was probably my only little taste of this album. And again, it's a fine opener track. I definitely should bring up some little facts about this, and it's one thing that always kind of, I definitely seemed to jump about me. It's about mostly the guitar, the riff for the song, and the way that it sounds, because of, for the longest time, I had a real kind of a little debate with myself whether or not if it actually is a guitar sound or a keyboard or a synth, because of it's a very unusual fucking sound for the song. I mean, there is definitely plenty of guitar tracks for it, like as far as the guitar solos, or at least has that electric feel. But I always debate whether or not if this was electric guitar or not. Well, looking on the Wikipedia, well, it answered all those questions. Apparently, it's in fact a phase shifter affected Wurzel electric piano played through Eddie Van Halen's 1960s model 100-watt Marshall Plexi, I think that says, yeah, Plexi amplifier. So definitely why that to town for me just comes off so odd, but at the same time there is a little bit of a quirk to it. I mean, it's definitely not a bad song off the album, but I don't know if I could say it's the best song off this album because of I'll get to some of my personal favorites off this album. And I'll definitely get into, I probably will say why I probably like this album more than the first album in many aspects, even better than the second one. But still, again, that's the song that opens up the album. Of course, Everybody Wants Some is probably the most biggest, probably up there again, is also one of the biggest hits off this album, which I've stated before, which is a fine, typical Van Halen hard rocker. It's it's definitely not a bad song. I mean, it's probably when I was growing up, I might have remember hearing it maybe once in a while on the radio, but those are vivid memories at this point. Those are very vivid. But now it definitely gets played a lot more, probably a lot more than "And the Cradle Will Rock." It probably gets the most play off the sound, so I guess it's starting to become overplayed, but not too much to where I'm almost sick of hearing it in a way, kind of like most songs off of Van Halen 1. I mean, there's a lot of, besides Running with the Devil and Jamie's Crying and Ain't Nothing But Love, I think that some of those songs are like fucking overplayed at this point. Even again, as some of the songs off of maybe Van Halen 2, but even though Van Halen 2 I think has a little bit some deeper cuts, even though I think there's also some barely above average songs off that one. But this one, I would say I actually can really tolerate Everybody Wants Some. But to me, where the album for me definitely starts to pick up is with the track that follows Everybody Wants Some. That's of course is track number 3, Fools, which is a deep cut. This is definitely one of to me, and I mean this whole from the album here on is mostly deep cuts. There's a lot of deep cuts on this album and stuff that isn't really so overplayed to death by the radio, and that's one thing why I will give this album a really edge above the first two in many aspects, especially the first one for me. I will actually edge this one above that because of it's not overplayed to death. And the song like Fooled, which is definitely a sort of great heavy bluesy rocker, and definitely sound like something that would have easily been off of the first album. Hell, I wouldn't have been surprised if it was one of those songs that was also somewhat written during their club days prior to recording the debut album. I mean, there's plenty of some. Actually, I will soon get to the song that was somewhat being constructed during the first album, actually. But Fools, I think, is a very much a highlight for me off this album. It's definitely one of my favorites off this one. So it's definitely a fine, meaty, hard rocker. And of course, next up is Romeo Delight. I mean, don't let the title completely fool if you haven't heard this. Don't let it. It's just a fucking meaty, fast, energetic, hard rocker. At times almost borders on speed metal in places, because it has those fast picking and almost machine gun type of feel to it. It's a very good track, and this one, I was alluding to, does kind of date back to their debut album. This originally was some of the riffs for this song was being worked on as a song called Get the Show on the Road, which you can find the demo for that song here on YouTube. It's on YouTube. And there's a part of that middle almost chorus section that obviously is taken from the song Get the Show on the Road and was then constructed into the finish here, which was Romeo Delight. But it definitely goes back and it's got that debut feel. It's a fast, heavy rocker and definitely wouldn't have been off that. Hell, I would say if you were to take the best songs off the debut, or what were the best songs, I mean, combine with some of the best songs from the other albums here and there, you probably could have yourself probably the ultimate best fucking Van Halen album, in my opinion. Get the heaviest fucking album as possible, but I think that's a fine track. It's one of my absolute favorites on here. So that definitely gets the first half of this, because now the second half begins, of course, with Tora Tora. Now, probably, again, another goofy title for it, but it doesn't really live up to what the song is, because you almost expect something a lot more goofier than what you actually get, which is surprisingly is probably the darkest and probably almost close to probably I guess satanic. I guess I can loosely say. I wouldn't be surprised if this actually caused a lot of controversy within the Christian was it Christian evangelical groups of the time. Hell, I wouldn't have been surprised if this actually really contributed to the satanic panic because of its opening and the way all of a sudden after it has that almost backmasking riff to it that it basically almost reminds me of, actually, I wouldn't be even been surprised if fucking Kronos of Venom was probably influenced by that beginning for Tora Tora and used it for In League with Satan. I wouldn't be surprised if he got inspiration, if he took inspiration from the beginning for Tora Tora, actually. I wouldn't be surprised. But of course, after that, it goes into a very short. I mean, this is probably the shortest song on here because it's basically, 57 minutes long. But those 57 minutes, I think, is probably some of the coolest shit I think Van Halen has ever come up with. Because it goes from that sort of, again, dark, almost backmasking riff to it that almost sounds like it's that Satan's about to be come through my coming through my fucking headphones, literally raise hell in my bedroom before it then breaks into that almost slow, very Black Sabbath inspired riff and pace, and it's actually pretty fucking cool. I kind of wished it was for the rest of this fucking song, but of course it serves as kind of an intro into the song after this, which is actually Loss of Control, which is though I mean, I already just said that Roman Juliet might have been one of the fastest songs on here, but then this song comes up, and it's just almost ridiculously fast. I mean, for 1980, I've already kind of alluded when I did my thrash metal month and did, like, the influences, whatever. I did a video of some of the bands that were kind of seen as almost, I guess, the prelude or influences for the bands. And this song, to me, I definitely pointed out to and definitely talked about, because this song is this is a fast song. I mean, it took me a long time though to kind of get into it, because most of the lyrics is a little bit weird in that chorus section where they're just almost like it almost comes up almost DIY punkish feel almost, and at time it's that Loss of Control chorus part that comes in during that heavy fucking riff or whatever. I think if anyone is familiar with the song probably knows what I'm talking about. But it kind of was a little bit something that took me off a bit. It put me off. But I've now come to really appreciate that track, and it's become probably, again, a song I really appreciate. I mean, for 1980, this was like a fucking state of the art. This was like literally most jaw-dropping track I can tell for at least 1980. I mean, if anybody that was mostly familiar with a lot of mainstream, I wasn't really familiar with that. Let's say, for example, Rapid Fire from Judas Priest, which was released in the same year as this. If they weren't completely familiar with a track like that, and mostly were just sticking with anything, let's say Van Halen was released at the time, that they were becoming the hottest band at this point, or Kiss and that, this probably was some of the fastest, most heaviest shit, and even the thrashiest shit they probably heard for 1980. This is definitely pretty much ahead for at least for a little while. This definitely showed how groundbreaking 1980 was proven much of a groundbreaking year 1980 was proven out to be. It's definitely a again, one of the most outrageous, most most jaw-dropping track, I guess, for 1980. Even though, again, it's a song I really appreciate. So there. So that's definitely at least track number 6. So the song that follows up, to some, after hearing those two tracks, which are probably Tora Tora and Loss of Control, being almost very ahead and almost the most, again, most groundbreaking songs on it, just being so different, so almost heavy in aspects, Take Your Whiskey Home probably might come off as a little bit of a step down. And it's very back to being typical Van Halen, for a very typical sort of, commercial feel to it. But besides that, I think it's another fine song. It's also a song that ain't butchered by the radio. I definitely can still listen to it and still hang with it. It's a fine song. I mean, it starts off almost has a very groovy, bluesy feel to it towards the end, which comes in for a few seconds or maybe a little minute before, again, going into the actual song. And it's a fine track for sure. maybe between some of the more commercial songs that might have been, or at least songs that were seen as commercial mainstream songs that Van Halen were written during this time frame. I think this is actually one of the probably the most tolerable right now, because like I've said, it's not butchered by the radio, so I actually dig this song. I can dig with it. Track number 8, I'm probably going to only talk about for a short little while, which of course is Could This Be Magic, which is kind of typical what you expect from David Lee Roth in general, because this definitely shows his influence for guys like maybe Frank Sinatra or those kind of guys. It's got that very almost 1930s or 1940s kind of swing feel to it. It's definitely, it shows where his influences come from, and it's very kind of similar, I guess you could say maybe Ice Cream Man off the first sound, but without any sort of electric guitar break. This is just very typical, though, of mostly of David Lee Roth and Van Halen. It's got those quirkiness to it, but it's a song I really don't have to talk too much about. So it's an okay song. It's probably for me, the only song I would find to be the weakest song off this album. But it's a fine, okay track, and I have no fucking issues with it like maybe some might have, but that's just me. Coming up number 9, of course, is in a simple rhyme, and it's again just like either Take Your Whiskey Home and Everybody Wants Some. It's definitely typical sort of, very, very good constructed melodic hard rock, and even some places this might even serve as probably the closest to, I think, to a ballad maybe from this time frame in some aspects. But compared to some of the more really melodic, almost really commercial songs off the second album, this song actually has a bit of a heaviness compared to any of the songs off the second album for me. So it's definitely a good way to end the album. I did. It's just a great, fine, melodic hard rocker. It does what it does. It has to do, and I definitely have no problem with it. So with that basically rounds out pretty much all of Women and Children First. And it's not a very long album either. It's basically, 33 minutes and 35 seconds. But during that time, it's probably, to me, my favorite Van Halen album, or at least up there as one of my favorites, maybe next to Fair Warning. Because this is definitely, as right now, one of my go-to albums for Van Halen at this point. I mean, it took me a long time to really get into this sound, but when I did, I now fucking love this album. I definitely, even besides the sort of, Could This Be Magic, which is probably the weakest song off this album, is not enough to completely, for me to really dislike this album. I definitely dig it, even again, besides, And the Cradle with Rock, and, Everybody Wants Some. Besides those two songs as well, even I can hang with those two. At most, this album I can at least hang with for a lot and not be bored of it. And again, it's not butchered by the radio, and that's another high point. It's definitely a fine, solid Van Halen album. And funny thing is, this is probably one of the highest ratest compared to AllMusic, which I think is a fucking pretentious rating platform, apparently gave this one pretty much 4.5 or 5.5 stars. Actually, they gave a pretty high rating, I think, compared to Van Halen 2, which again just a little higher than that one. Whereas at least the first one's got fucking 5 stars. I say I put this one a lot more above the first album. Some may disagree with me, but that's just my opinion. I put this one a lot more above the first album, even if I have some nostalgic memories of the first one. And I definitely put this one even way more above the second album, even if there's a few songs off Van Halen 2 that I do kind of like. So with that, since of course this album hit its 40th anniversary in a bit, I would like to know what your thoughts on this album. What are your memories of this album and so on? And because of its anniversary, and maybe because of this video, you're probably going to end up putting this album on for old time's sake, or probably were inspired to pull this album out. So with that, I hope you all enjoyed this. Every Thrasher Sam out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.